Good morning.
Good morning.
We're asking for ratification of outdoor burn ban for Hinds County, which was issued July 3rd, 2012. Will be in effect until August the 6th, 2012, unless lifted before then.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Question.
It's been moved and properly second. Question for Mr. Stokes.
How do you enforce the ban?
There is state law that provides for the sheriff's office to enforce that. Basically, when we go out, we ask them to put the fire out. If they don't, the sheriff's office can issue them a citation.
I'm saying, I noticed in the rule, I saw people burning, but if no one, I didn't see the UMP back, if no one calls it in.
If no one calls it in, there's really no way to enforce it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
You see a burn, you can call it.
Did we carry this up? All those in favor of?
Aye.
Opposed to? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Mr. Bryant, continue.
Mr. Carl Felix, Public Works Director.
Good morning, Mr. President, on board members. First item I have is approval to reclassify an executive assistant senior position to engineering technician 3.
So moved.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of?
Yes.
Opposed to? Motion passes.
Next item I have is request approval to advertise and hire engineering tech 3 effective immediately. If an existing staff member is selecting for the position, request approval to advertise and hire for that position.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of?
Yes.
Opposed to? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Question, Mr. President.
Question for Mr. Stokes?
Mr. Felix, two issues. Would it be a detriment to your office if someone was removed, and I'm trying not to call names, but it just seems like we need a planning department. And I know the only planner we've had is in your office. And it just seems like while we're going through the budget process, that we can realign some positions to create this planning department that's really, really needed. And you might say that, you know, it'll have a negative effect on your office. But I think that Hinds County really need to move toward planning department, planning. And I still think zoning and planning should have been together all the time. And I wouldn't want to make any recommendations in writing unless I just bring it up to you in public.
Well, the only way it would be a detriment to the Public Works Department if the Public Works Department wasn't able to replace that person.
So as long as the position is placed, you wouldn't have a problem with us
No,
trying to
replace
establish
and
planning
fund.
department. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Felix. Mr. Bryant, continue. I'm sorry. We'll now go to Ms. Eddie Jean Carr. I'm sorry, Ms. Carr, the Chancery Clerk.
Good morning again, Mr. President, members of the board. We have orders canceling tax sale, authorizing refund, reassessment, changes to the assessment roll, and surrender tags for your approval.
What's the pleasure? It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of? Opposed to? Motion passes.
We have an order approving the additions and deletions of the supplemental roll for homestead exemptions for the year 2011.
What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of? Opposed to? Motion passes.
We have 3/16 section leases this morning. The first is between the Clinton Public School District and the North Hinds Water Association.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of? Opposed to? Motion passes.
Thank you very much. The second one is between the Hinds County Board of Education and, hold on, Dan Smith.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
So moved.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in
Question,
favor?
Mr. President.
Question from Mr. Stokes.
Ms. Scott, I don't know who can help me with this. Now, Hinds County Board of Education, they have their own board. Is that not correct? And they're elected. Okay. What's the county's role with county education? If they have their own board who vote on their decisions, what's the county's role? And I'm saying that because even in looking at the budget, we're paying for crossing guards, and it's not that. Don't they have a budget?
We set the millage is set by them and it's passed on to us and we collect.
But don't we give it back to them?
Yes.
So why are we paying for their stuff when they have their own monies? They have a board, they spend money. Why is the county having to fund this stuff? I know we fund this, the crossing guards.
That's a function of the board of supervisors.
That's $250,000. If they have their budget, why they're not paying?
I can answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Campbell, I'm sorry, I didn't see your light.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, let's see, Ms. Campbell has something else.
Is a provided crossing guard services is a function of the Hinds County Board of Supervisors.
But what I'm saying, they have their own budget.
If the statute allows, then of course we can transfer that responsibility to the school board. I don't know how.
Even if we don't transfer it, we can have them to pay us that $250,000. That's what I'm saying. I don't mind us doing it, but we need $250,000, and that's a $250,000 that could come into this. But they have their own budget. They have money, they have a board and everything else. That should be their responsibility. It shouldn't fall within this board to find $250,000.
I agree with you. We gained $250,000 and moving on. But the only statutory authority this board has is if the school board makes a request for a millage increase or a tax increase, then by statute we must give them that increase. But as far as their day-to-day operations, we do not get involved and have no and do not have any statutory authority to do so.
That's what I'm saying. If we don't have statutory authority, if this board decide one day we're not going to put up that $250,000, then that school board would decide to find $250,000 to pay for crossing guards. But right now, it's not. They don't have to do it because we putting that bill. We don't have any authority with them. We're approving anything they do, but yet we're putting up a $250,000. It's not right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Stokes, we will continue to look at that.
I will get with the board attorney and we'll try to research the responsibility of the board and make a report back.
Thank you.
All right, continue.
You have a motion and a second.
All those in favor of?
Yes.
Opposed to? Motion
And I
passes.
would suggest the county administrator on behalf of the board of supervisors
Okay.
also make an inquiry.
Would you please note that, Mr. Brown? Okay. Continue, Greta.
The final 16th section leads this morning is again with the Hinds County Board of Education and Aluda Bailey.
What's the pleasure? It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of? Opposed to? Motion passes.
We are now at item number 4, which is objections to the motor vehicle assessment schedule.
So moved.
Well, I have to do something here. There's objection to the motor vehicle assessment schedule. I'd like to open a hearing of the 2012 motor vehicle assessment schedule and to see if anyone has any objection to the 2012 motor vehicle assessment schedule. Upon hearing no objections, then I will now close the meeting to the 2012 motor vehicle assessment schedule. Do we need a motion after that?
Yes, sir.
Now we need to entertain a motion. It's so moved. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor of?
Yes.
Opposed to? Motion passes. Do I need to read the resolve part?
You can. It's just to approve the motor vehicle assessment schedule for this year.
The resolve to accept the motor vehicle assessment schedule 2012 documents affixed thereto and incorporated herein. Okay?
And finally, we have minute insertions as listed on your agenda. No action is required on your
Question, Mr. President. Question for Mr. Stubbs.
On minute insertions, precinct 62 is being moved in District 3. Cherry Grove Church used to be the voting precinct for 19. And what's the procedure to get Cherry Grove Church back? It moved from Cherry Grove to Goodwill closed. Now it's at a store and it's hard to get in and out. And the church is bigger. People can walk to it. There's no homes where it's located at now.
You would need to work with through the election committee or that district, and so they'll put it back on the agenda to remove it and add it back.
Okay. We will now go back to the board attorney for a consideration of going into executive session.
Mr. President,
Yes.
can you address the board testimony before you go into executive session?
Yes.
We have a request and I don't know what the proper procedure is, so I'll just let my attorney make the request.
Good morning, Mr. President, board members. I'm Attorney Warren Martin. I represent Byron Graves. We noted on the agenda that one of the discussion items in executive session is potential litigation matters. We request to make a presentation before the board in executive session regarding potential litigation matter regarding my client, Ms. Graves.
That would be, that determination should be made in accordance with statute, so I will defer to the board attorney as to whether or not that fits under the consideration for executive session.
That would fit under the consideration for executive session under the statute 25-41 4G, and that reads as follows. B. Strategy sessions or negotiations with respect to expected litigation or assistance of an appealable order when an open meeting would have a deferential effect on the litigation position of the public body. So that will be acceptable before.
Okay, let me ask a question because I think I know what Mr. Fisher is going to ask. By virtue of the fact that it was not on the agenda, would that have an impact as to whether or not they can be included in the executive session since it was not included as a part of the original agenda?
It's my understanding that all matters have to be presented at least 10 days prior to the board meeting in order to be put on the agenda for executive session or open meeting. So to that degree, I don't think it would qualify for this executive session, but it would be open for future executive sessions. It would place on the agenda.
Okay.
And Mr. President, my response is briefly. We would include that it was on the agenda as item number 2, item A, under Edgene Clark, the ratification of petitions for election commissioner candidates for the general election scheduled November 4th, 2012.
Okay. I understand, but I'm going to have to defer to what the attorney advances the particular board at this particular point in time because it was not specifically under the part of executive session. So if it's allowable, I have no objection to do it. It's also going to have to go to a vote for consideration, but I'm going to defer to her to let her advise the board as to what we should do at this particular point. If it's in your estimation whether or not it's legal for us to do it, then we will bring it to a vote for consideration. And based upon the vote from the consideration, then we will make a vote to move to do that. But if you don't think that we need to do that as a matter of consideration, then we will not do that. And we'll ask them to bring it back at a later time.
Mr. President.
Okay, let me go, Mr. Fisher. He has his light on first, and then we'll come right to you, Ms. Gowan.
I had a question. When you read the statute, it talked about the board making strategic decisions in the course of litigation. I don't know what a strategic decision would be made other than whether or not the board would accept or reject an office or move forward or not move forward with litigation. This matter is, I think, already in front of the court, or at least motion papers have been filed at some level of court. So this would be more of a discussion or a talk about her side of the case and what they think we ought to do versus a decision that I think falls under the definition of the strategic implications here of the statute. It just seems to me like we're talking about, well, we continue to talk about the case, where in effect, I think we may end up being on opposite sides of this issue. So I'm a little confused on that also.
Okay, Mrs. Galvin.
I was just going to mention that the item has been brought up on 2 occasions, and that of our Chancery Clerk, Mrs. Carr, and our Board Attorney did list the acceptance of petitions for candidates for the Office of Election Commission. Now, I don't know what you all wish to present to this board. Again, because the matter is in litigation, I don't see what purpose it will serve you to request go into executive session. Can you explain your purpose?
Yes, ma'am. Supervisor. As I understand it, the board took the position that it was going to table the discussion of voting on this matter until an AG opinion had been obtained. My point and purpose in going into executive session would be to explain to the board the fact that the AG opinion may not do very much good in light of the fact that litigation has already been commenced.
Okay. Again, I'll go back to the board attorney, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I think that by statute we have to be very close, because we've been in and out of executive session so many times, and we've been criticized for doing so. So I want to make sure that it's clear as to what we're doing, and that what we can do is, if you feel in your advice as our legal advisor that we can do this, we will do this. If it's in your determination that they should wait for an additional week, since we're not going to make a decision today, I don't think the time is of the essence today to do this today, unless you have something that's unforeseen that we, none one on this board, can foresee.
Mr. President, just briefly, I think I do have something that will benefit the board that is unforeseen. And to address very briefly Supervisor Fisher's concern, we do not plan to address the merits of the case at all.
Okay.
Once again, though, I don't see what the board's strategy on whether to move forward with the case or not is affected with this, because we're not making a decision to move forward with the case. We have a table now, and y'all have already proceeded in another level, or in a court level. It renders this, it would render anything that I can imagine you would bring up with it.
Okay. Again.
If the parties have never come at first, I think that a more proper way to present this to the board would be to give a 10-day notice and to have and possibly be invited to executive session at this time. And I do think that at this time, a strategy session minus the adverse party would be more effective than a meeting on today during executive session.
Okay. With that having been said, I think I have it correct is that you would prefer that they go through the policy of submitting this 10 days to be on executive session. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Martin, I'm sorry to advise you, but we don't think that this particular point in time that would fit for executive session, but you do have an opportunity to go through the policy to bring it back, and we'll do it from that particular point.
We certainly respect the board and the advice of the Office of Board Attorney.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now go to the board attorney to give information for. Well, I think the way we're supposed to do this is I will need a motion for consideration to go into executive session.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second for the consideration of going into executive session. All those in favor of?
Yes.
Opposed to? Motion passes. Now we need a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of? We need a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
For the purpose of.
For the purpose of?
There will be executive session for the purpose of discussions on potential litigation as authorized by the statute 25-41-7, section 4, subsection B, which is potential litigation matters, and it reads as follows. For strategy sessions for negotiations with respect to respective litigation or issuance of an approval order when an open meeting will have a detrimental effect on litigation position of the public body. And number 2, to discuss the fire and clean corridor and acquisitions of land as authorized in statute by section 25-41-7, section 4, subsection G, which reads as follows. Transaction of business and discussion regarding the prospective purchase or leasing of lands. And lastly, for discussion and action on the Old Capitol Green as provided by statute in 25-41-7, section 4, subsection G, which reads for the transaction of business and discussion regarding the prospective purchase, sale, or leasing of lands.
Okay, all those in favor of? Need a second? Mr. Fisher, second. All those in favor of? Opposed to? Motion passes. We will now go into executive session at 11:09.